A Snake in the Grass, A Wolf at the Door by Black K. Cat. Chapter 7. The sky grows darker the closer they get to Ame. Dark, heavy clouds building every time Orochimaru glances up. Rain is starting too, intermittent splatters of it that do little to ease Orochimaru's tension. It crawls up his spine, tightening muscles, making him twitch at the smallest noise, and he can't even understand why. The mission has been quiet so far, uneventful, and Orochimaru's summons report nothing but small animals stirring ahead of them. Seated cross-legged by the meager warmth of the campfire, Orochimaru stares into the shifting flames and tries to even out his breathing. He's drawn up as tense as a koto string, and there's no reason for it. Perhaps it is because his last mission to Ame ended in the cracking of his world. But Orochimaru doesn't want to think he is so easily rattled. Regardless, it doesn't feel like unfounded nerves. It feels like there are eyes on him, like someone is staring and has been since they left Konoha, even though he can sense no one. He touches the sharp tip of his earring, worries the tooth between his fingers, and thinks. Danzo has been quiet lately, which is unnerving, especially with war building on the horizon. Oh, he's sat in on meetings, given Sarutobi dire warnings, and made thinly veiled digs about Konoha's strength not being what it used to be. But Orochimaru can't recall the last time he actually saw the man walking around the village. Perhaps it means nothing. Danzo is an old man, after all, and one can hardly expect him to remain active in all ways. But Orochimaru is suspicious. Danzo is a war hawk. In the face of these hair-trigger tensions with Iwa and Suna, Orochimaru would expect him to be more visible than ever, feeding the tug-of-war and pushing every shinobi to train their hardest. Orochimaru has seen his absence and marked it. He sees many things, even, perhaps especially, when people don't want him to. He doesn't forget easily either. Even now, he remembers Danzo's offer to join his special route squad, and the last few months his eyes have tracked the number of Anbu in the village, and come up some 2 dozen short. It is not a large-scale Hokage-ordered mission. Orochimaru discreetly checked with Sarutobi, careful not to mention his suspicions, though his teacher's eyes grew warily thoughtful when he asked. And so Orochimaru's only conclusion can be that Danzo is taking independent action. Sarutobi has long turned a blind eye to Danzo and his doings because he believes they are always for the good of the village, but Orochimaru is not nearly so trusting. He thinks of Danzo's avaricious eyes seen across a grave and presses his thumb to the cool curve of the moonstone drop. He is not a child with an overactive imagination. He is a shinobi almost 30 years old with experience in one war already and a lifetime of trying to puzzle out people's motives. Perhaps there is another explanation. Perhaps he is simply seizing on Danzo as the culprit because of past experiences with the man. But, heavy thoughts there, lovely, a warm voice says, and Orochimaru glances up, startled, as Sakamo takes a seat beside him. Their knees brush as Sakamo sprawls out, legs stretched in front of him and feet practically in the fire, and Orochimaru feels his breath catch in his throat. He forces himself not to otherwise react, though. He arranges his face into blandly curious lines and arches a brow at his friend. Reading the question in his gaze, Sakamo chuckles. He dips his chin into Orochimaru's hand. You only play with your earrings when you're struggling with something. Can I be of any help? Gods. Orochimaru lets his fingers drop away from the moonstone, slightly chagrined. He hadn't realized his tell was quite so obvious. Just pondering, he says, because he knows if he mentions anything further, Sakamo will start bristling, his eyes darkening with the tightly contained anger that makes him so fearsome. He's a big man, if not as broad across the shoulders as Jiraiya, and his fury is like a raging current hidden deep beneath the river's placid surface. Once already, Orochimaru has seen it turned on Danzo in his own defense, but Danzo is a dangerous man. Too many pushes from someone as powerful and well-liked as Sakamo, and he'll push back. The expectant expression on Sakamo's face tells him he's not getting off that lightly. However, Orochimaru rolls his eyes and decides he can give a little if it will get the older man to back down. Besides, Sakamo is his squad leader until they get to the border, where Orochimaru will separate and head off to fulfill his own mission. There are eyes on us, I believe. He allows, picking his words carefully. Have you felt them? Sakamo's eyes sharpen, and though his sprawl stays loose-limbed and lazy, Orochimaru is suddenly reminded of a snake's stillness just before it strikes. "I can't say I have," he says, and the tone is light, but the words are quiet enough not to carry beyond the two of them. His gaze lingers on Orochimaru's face for a moment, unreadable, and then he smiles. "Of course, you're better than I am at spotting tails," he allows without hesitation, and it still feels like a shock to Orochimaru after so long of beating with Jiraiya, even as he loved him. Sakamoto is free with his praise, with his unending admiration, and every time Orochimaru feels a little like his feet have been cut out from under him because of it. Orochimaru takes a breath, rolls his shoulders a little, and tries not to lean into Sakamo's warmth. Sakamo has been looking at him recently. Stolen moments, little bits of thoughtful regard, a lingering sense of decisions coming slowly into being. Orochimaru doesn't know what it means, but he wonders. "I haven't felt anything concrete," he admits, folding his hand in his lap and twisting his fingers together. "And not even Kiyohime can find any trace of the Watchers, if they're present. Perhaps I'm simply being paranoid." Sakamo looks thoughtful, even as he reaches out to gently grab Orochimaru's wrists and lift them onto his own thigh. "If you say you feel something, I don't doubt you," he says absently, and then frowns, curling his fingers around Orochimaru's. "Lovely, your hands are like ice. Did you bring your gloves? Why don't you move closer to the fire?" Orochimaru's eye roll is very, very obvious, but he doesn't even attempt to pull his hands from Sakamo's grasp. The Hatake is impossibly warm against the cool of the night air, and Orochimaru is willing to admit that he is slightly chilled, though Sakamo is, as ever, exaggerating, because doesn't even try to hide the fact that mentally he is actually a gigantic mother hen stuffed into a wolf's body. "It's hardly even winter yet," he protests. "I hadn't thought to need them, and I cannot get physically closer to the fire without sitting in it. So you will excuse me if I stay right here, Mutt." Sakamo just laughs. "You need to work on your pet names, Orochimaru. Come on, if you're lovely, can't I at least be handsome?" Orochimaru opens his mouth to respond cuttingly, but loses his breath in an undignified yelp as Sakamo uses the grip on his hands to haul him bodily into the other man's lap. He twists elbow coming up to hopefully give the oaf a blank eye, but Sakamo deftly dodges and wraps his arms around Orochimaru's torso to pin the Sanin's arms to his sides and drops his chin on one bony shoulder. "There," he says cheerfully. "Now you won't be cold." Orochimaru hisses at him in pure aggravation, wriggling and squirming against Sakamo's hold, but unable to break it. He can feel the other shinobi accompanying them glance their direction and shake their heads and go back to settling up their bedrolls again, clearly dismissing it as a Sakamo thing. They're all his friends and quite obviously used to his bouts of insanity. By now, after more than half a decade, Orochimaru should be used to it as well, but he's still not. Sometimes he doesn't think he ever will be, because compared to most people, Sakamo is just so much more. "I will strangle you in your sleep, Hatake," he hisses, finally giving in and letting his struggles subside. He'll never admit to it, of course, but Sakamo does have a very small point. Orochimaru has a hard time regulating his body temperature, and the cold makes him sluggish. With the furnace warmth of Sakamo's body at his back, he can finally feel the faint shivers he refused to acknowledge disappearing, life creeping back into limbs he hadn't realized felt deadened. Really, he should just give up on having any sort of dignity at all when Sakamo is around. It would probably be better for him in the long run. Warm breath tickles his neck as Sakamo shifts, settling a little more comfortably and tipping his head so that his cheek rests against Orochimaru's shoulder. A faint trace of stubble catches at Orochimaru's hair, and he doesn't allow himself to shiver. "You won't," Sakamo denies, cheerful but also completely certain. "Oh?" Orochimaru arches a brow, even though Sakamo can't see it. "Such faith in my good nature, Sakamo. I assure you, the consensus is that I possess no such thing." That earns him a soft snort, warm against his skin. But people are stupid," Sakamo points out, and his arms tighten around Orochimaru's waist as he shifts again, burying his face in Orochimaru's long hair and pulling a large chunk of it free from its ribbon. It slides forward when Orochimaru shifts, half obscuring Sakamo's face, but Orochimaru can still see the stubborn set to his mouth out of the corner of his eye. They've never taken the time to get to know you, or they'd realize just how incredible you actually are. It feels like his heart has flipped sideways but kept on beating, like the shock of electricity without any of the pain. Sakamo has said such things before, of course, but not like this. Not from such a short distance away, his hands on Orochimaru's skin, his mouth mere centimeters away from Orochimaru's throat. Orochimaru knows this is simply sharing warmth, a gesture of friendship, but Sakamo's eyes, when he turns his head, are dark and full of impossible warmth, and Orochimaru might be bad with people, but he is good with Sakamo. There is something waiting just out of their sight, and Orochimaru wonders if he's brave enough to take that last step towards it. He won't be, maybe Sakamo will, and Orochimaru's breath catches in his throat as all the many implications of that thought hit him. Trust, he thinks, and that's nothing new, not where Sakamo is concerned. But never before has it seemed so blatant. Love, he thinks, and for the very first time since his parents died, it doesn't hurt at all. You're a fool, Orochimaru says, voice rough, and can't tell which of them he means. Sakamo's eyes crinkle, and his smile is impossibly fond and familiar. Maybe, he allows, but then I'm a very, very lucky fool. That, Orochimaru thinks, applies to both of them. He lifts a hand carefully, cautiously, and lays it over Sakamo's on his stomach. Just a touch, not a caress or an attempt to hold hands or anything of the sort, but it's more than Orochimaru has ever offered to anyone beyond Kakashi, who is a child and therefore safe. It's more than he had ever thought to give anyone before Sakamo came into his life. It gets him a chuckle, soft and warm, in thanks. And that's enough. Orochimaru allows the moment to hold for an endless number of heartbeats before he elbows Sakamo in the gut, smacks him over the head, and slides out of his lap again. He likes to retain at least a little dignity after all, even if Sakamo never allows him much. Because he's undoubtedly a fool, at least as much as Orochimaru himself is. Sakamo simply laughs. Don't worry, kid. Minato will love you, the white-haired oaf says cheerfully, clapping Kakashi on the shoulder. Kakashi staggers from the force of it, then manages to find his footing and turns his sharpest glare on Orochimaru's former teammate. I'm not worried, he says, with all the derision that comment deserves. I just don't understand why I'm being indentured to a jonin who can't even manage to remain uninjured. Jiraiya rolls his eyes. He probably thinks it's subtle, but Kakashi is used to Orochimaru, who might as well be the patron saint of exasperation, especially when Sakamo is around. You're not being indentured, brat, so lighten up. Minato just needs someone familiar with the library to find stuff for him. And from what Orochimaru says of you, that won't be a problem. Besides, the jerk asked me to keep an eye on you, and this makes it easy. Kakashi feels absolutely not one shred of remorse for turning sharply and kicking Jiraiya as hard as he can in the shin. There's a howl of pain, and Jiraiya leaps backwards, trips over the leg of a chair, and slams into the wall with an earth-shattering thud. He slides down it, clutching at his leg and staring at Kakashi with wide, wounded, deeply offended eyes. But Kakashi doesn't waver. He plants his hands on his hips and hisses, "Next time you call my Oro a jerk, I'm aiming for something a little higher up and a lot more precious to you. Got it?" But he is a jerk, Jiraiya protests, then snaps a hand up to cover his groin when Kakashi lifts a threatening foot. Well, Kakashi is willing to admit that's mostly true where other people are concerned, but still. Don't call him that! Are you threatening my teammate? The soft, dry voice makes Kakashi look up and around to find that they have a spectator. Sharp brown eyes take in the scene, Jiraiya on the ground, clutching his family jewels, with a skinny 6-year-old looming over him, and then narrow. Tsunade stares for one more moment, then looks back at Kakashi and arches a brow. Yes, Kakashi confirms blandly. Maybe if she takes offense at his actions, she'll drag him away to punish him, and instead of helping this idiot bedbound jonin, he can do something more appealing, like scrubbing bedpans. Tsunade snorts, reaching out and ruffling his hair fondly. Good boy! If you need an edge, he's weak against acrobatics. Heaven alone knows why, after being on a team with Orochimaru for so many years, but it's just more proof that he's hopeless. Kakashi files this information away for future use, even as Jiraiya squawks with wounded dignity and flails his arms at the blonde. What? Tsunade, you're supposed to be on my side! Her answering smile is the sweetest, most cutting-edge Kakashi has ever witnessed, and he is dutifully impressed. Oh, Jiraiya, whatever gave you that impression? Then she turns her attention to Kakashi again. I'll take it you're the one they got to play babysitter for Namikaze? When he nods, she sighs. I was just on my way to check on him. Go on, I'll lead you there. Casting one last glare back at the Toad Sage, Kakashi follows her through the corridors of the hospital and up a flight of stairs. He has to hurry to keep up with her long strides, but he appreciates that she doesn't try to slow down as a favor to him. He'd rather rush than have people cater to him, and Tsunade clearly understands that if the sideways glance he gets is anything to go by. I take it your father and Orochimaru are away? Tsunade asks, pushing open a pair of swinging doors and holding them so Kakashi can duck through. She consults the clipboard tucked under one arm, then turns left, heading down another two-white hall. Yes, Kakashi confirms. Dosan and Oro are on overlapping missions, but they couldn't tell me where. Tsunade hums thoughtfully. Well, hopefully your father will be able to keep Orochimaru out of trouble, even if that's a high order. If you need anything while they're away, Kakashi, I'd be more than happy to help. Shizune could always use a training partner. It takes effort not to grimace. Kakashi has sparred with Shizune several times already, and her poisons make it far more complicated than he's used to. Add to that an edge of ruthless recklessness, oddly like Orochimaru's, and Kakashi would be more than happy to skip out on any sort of training featuring the Slug Sanin's apprentice. Guy, who is obviously an idiot, cheerfully insists that a good portion of it is jealousy stemming from the fact that Orochimaru is very fond of the girl. He is absolutely wrong, because Kakashi is not jealous. Thank you, Tsunade-sama, he says dutifully, because she's Orochimaru's friend, first and foremost. And he'll be rude to Jiraiya, who brings up a strange sort of melancholy in the Snake Sanin at times, but he won't inflict the same on Tsunade, who regularly makes him smile. Tsunade casts him an amused glance, as though she knows what he's thinking, and then pushes open one of the doors leading off the hall. She swoops in, clipboard coming up, and Kakashi trails after her, a little curious despite himself. He's heard a lot about Namikaze Minato from his father and Orochimaru, as well as the rest of the village, and knows that the Jonin is a genius like him and Orochimaru, hailed as the best of a generation. Kakashi has been dreading this meeting, mostly because he assumes he'll be treated like either a child or a weapon and doesn't want to deal with either, but he stops short, blinking dazedly at the scene before him, and carefully revises his opinion. Tsunade-sama! The man in the bed squeaks as he goes crimson, attempting to jerk the covers up to his chin and failing miserably thanks to the red-headed woman perched on top of him. The blonde's shirt is missing and his pants are gaping open, and the woman is in just a chest wrap and panties. There is absolutely no doubt as to what they're doing, and Kakashi bangs a little, clapping his hands over his eyes. This is far, far worse than the time he walked in on Orochimaru sleeping on his father's shoulder, and his father playing with Orochimaru's hair and wearing the stupidest, dopiest smile Kakashi has ever seen in his life. However, Tsunade just sounds amused as she says, Kushina-chan finally got fed up with Minato's blushing virgin impression, I see. The redhead laughs. Oh, San, can you come back in an hour? I was just about to get his pants off, and it's taken me weeks to make it this far. Namikaze Minato, Konoha's yellow flash and widely lauded genius regarding all things shinobi, makes a strange, gurgling, gasping noise like a dying cat. Kakashi wonders absently if breaking his own leg will get him out of what is clearly going to be half a month of sheer torture, because he will never be able to look at Minato and not see this. Sure! Kakashi risks a glance up, and Tsunade is on the verge of laughter, a wickedly amused light in her eyes. I was just coming to introduce Minato to the Genin, who will be helping him for the next 2 weeks. She ignores the pitiful, plaintive, mortified sound Minato makes and continues right over top of it. I'm sure Kakashi needs to eat by now, so I'll wander back this way when we're done. Take your time. Kushina's grin is both foxy and roguish. Don't worry, it's him. Stop that, just hold still. This is your own fault for not being able to hold my hand without me starting it. But, why am I on the bottom? And I was going to bring you roses before we... Minato wails plaintively just before Tsunade pushes Kakashi out into the hall, locks the door from the inside, and pulls it shut. The blonde shakes her head, regarding the door with a look that's halfway between fondness and exasperation, and then turns her smile on Kakashi. Come on, kid. Let's leave them to it. Kushina's been fed up with Minato's shyness for months. I'm just surprised this didn't happen weeks ago. Kakashi grimaces, swearing to himself that he will never, ever enter a room occupied by Minato without knocking. Very loudly at that. Fire Country's forests thin as they approach Ame's border, fading into nothing but a handful of scraggly, half-drowned corpses by the time they make it to the meeting point. It's an outcropping of tall, jagged rocks that form just enough of a shelter to fit Orochimaru, Sakamoto, and the 3 jonin accompanying them. A river several meters to the west provides enough sound to cover low-voiced conversation, and Orochimaru takes advantage of it, laying out their maps in the relative dryness of the overhanging stone. You know your path? He asks, and Sakamoto's second, a Hagane by the spiky black hair, inclines his head. The Suna outpost is there, he says, tapping the spot on the map. Nothing is marked, on the off chance that the maps are stolen or the one carrying them is captured, but they all remember the briefing well enough. We'll be in and out in the space of a week, hopefully. 2 days there, 2 days back, a day to plan and complete the infiltration, and a buffer just in case. Orochimaru nods because their mission is far more dangerous. He's merely a diplomatic courier, in comparison. We'll be waiting for you, lovely, Sakamoto says gently, clasping his shoulders. You shouldn't worry about us. You're the one without backup. He rolls his eyes faintly, though the expression is lost in the shadows, and huffs. I am also unlikely to encounter any serious threats. He points out, you will need to secure records of Suna's troop movements without being detected. Sakamoto just laughs, like he always does when Orochimaru shows his entirely justified concern. All in a day's work. He deflects cheerfully, and then rises to his feet. Orochimaru follows him, passing the map to the slender Kamizuki woman with an inclination of his head. She tips hers in return, then slips back out into the rain, the other 2 jonin trailing behind her. You'll be careful, Sakamoto says, not taking solemn eyes off of Orochimaru as he hovers in the opening. I don't like you going off by yourself, but given that you know Ame the best of the 5 of us... Do you think I'm Jiraiya? Orochimaru scoffs, but can't quite muster up the bite those words would once have had. Of course I will. My sense of self-preservation is still entirely intact. Thank you. That wins him a chuckle, and the hand on his shoulder softens, curves around it rather than grips. It's a gentle touch, a little more than friendly, and Orochimaru flicks his eyes to it, and then back up to meet Sakamoto's gaze. They hold there for a moment, the weight of things unsaid between them. But Orochimaru can't find the words he needs. Still, there is no crushing feel of pressure, the way there was when Jiraiya declared he was remaining in Ame. And Orochimaru knows without even a shadow of doubt that nothing could make Sakamoto stay here, not when Konoha is truly his home, with ties to pull him back, no matter how far he travels away. He lets out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, and with a surge of bravery he hadn't expected, lifts his own hand in return. His fingers cover Sakamoto's broader ones, slide into the gaps between them, and curve down to touch his palm. And Sakamoto smiles. He curls his fingers over Orochimaru's, squeezing lightly. Come back safe, Orochimaru, he says quietly. When we're back in the village, let's talk. And there is the first step laid out before them. Or maybe it's simply another step, and the first one was taken when Sakamoto moved in front of a blow for him. Orochimaru would prefer to think of it as the latter. This is just another part of what they already have. And even if it is not what he thinks, he will accept anything. Anything at all to keep that warmth in Sakamo's smoke-gray eyes. Let's talk then. He agrees and forces himself to take a step back. Keep yourself well, Sakamo. As always, use of his given name makes Sakamo grin, and he leans forward, arms coming up to wrap Orochimaru in a hug just this side of too tight as he practically lifts him off his feet. Orochimaru gets a face full of messy silver hair, a breath of warmth that smells of earth and autumn, an ache in his ribs that echoes the one inside his chest. Then Sakamo is gone, slipping back out into the rain and calling his squad around him. Laying a hand on the cool stone, Orochimaru watches him until the four shinobi pass from his sight and then turns his attentions to his surroundings. The feeling of eyes on him is still unmistakable. Orochimaru tilts his head, assessing the shiver of awareness that crawls up his spine. Paranoid jerk, Jiraiya has always called him, but it saved their lives more than once. He won't allow himself to dismiss the feeling as overactive imagination, not given the way most of his solo missions devolve into messes of bad luck and deadly danger. But at least on solo missions, Orochimaru has no one to protect, no one else to account for. He is a wily jerk, a snake able to slip from any trap, and it's high time his watchers learned that. Taking a breath, he twists his fingers into a seal and calls up his chakra. With a poof of smoke, two identical copies appear beside him, and the three of them leap out of the obscuring rock in tandem. The clones head east and north, but Orochimaru takes the west, aiming for the river there. His doubles will get as far as they're able before they dispel, keeping to the shadows and moving quickly. It's fairly well known, however, that Orochimaru despises the gold and hates the wet. Chances are his watchers will dismiss him as a clone right away, and that's worth the edge, even though what he's about to do makes Orochimaru grimace. He drops the outer layer of his kimono on the riverbank, braces himself, and dies. The water is a shock of ice that almost stops his lungs, but Orochimaru doesn't allow himself to quail. Gritting his teeth, he kicks off the slippery bottom and turns into the swift-moving current, letting it carry him westward in a rush. The things I do for you, Sarutobi-sensei, he thinks, already feeling the ache of holding his breath building in his lungs. His gear is all packed in watertight cases, and the scroll he carried from the Hokage to the leader of the Akatsuki is also safely stowed. There is no reason he can't follow the river right to Amagakure itself, where he's heard Akatsuki have made themselves a base within the cliffs and caves beyond the village. Right beneath Hanzo's nose, and there's something distinctly satisfying about that. Orochimaru has no love of the man who defeated him, Tsunade and Jiraiya, even if it earned them their title. Failure is something he doesn't easily accept, and the fact that these Akatsuki oppose Hanzo's regime is just one more reason to seek an alliance with them as far as Orochimaru is concerned. Judging himself to be far enough away from any watchful eyes, Orochimaru allows himself to surface briefly, taking a deep gulp of air that feels practically balmy in comparison to the water around him. But it's too soon to risk emerging, and with a sound of disgust, Orochimaru allows himself to sink back into the current, wending his steady way towards Ame's hidden village. His first realization that something has changed comes with a sudden darkening of the water around him, packed earth banks replaced with solid stone, as the current narrows and deepens. Orochimaru pauses, bracing himself against a jagged edge of stone, and debates the wisdom of surfacing and looking around. He's been underwater for almost half the day, pulling air down around him to breathe in what is the most unorthodox use of a windjutsu he's ever attempted. Still, it's kept him from having to reveal himself every 3 minutes, which can only benefit him in reaching his destination unseen. A shape moves above the surface, joined by another and then a third, obviously having spotted him. Orochimaru resigns himself to a discovery, pushing off the stone and letting himself rise. Just before he reaches it, a hand is thrust into the water, empty of a weapon, and with a palm open in a clear offer. Orochimaru hesitates, but takes it, nearly numb fingers curling around the stranger's wrist. The stranger pulls, and Orochimaru clears the water with a gasp, letting himself be dragged up onto the smooth stone at the river's edge. Immediately, he starts trembling in the almost painful warmth of the air, wrapping his arms around himself and trying to chafe life back into his limbs. Konoha shinobi are all insane, a flat voice says, and half a heartbeat later, a thick, heavy cloak drops on Orochimaru's shoulders. He inclines his head in thanks, clutching it more tightly to him, and looks up at his companions. Two young men and an equally young woman, one redhead, one with orange hair, and the woman with a dreamy shade of blue and a paper flower tucked behind her ear. Familiar, right down to the wary eyes regarding him carefully. Jiraiya sends his regards. He manages before he loses control of himself, and his teeth start chattering too hard to speak. The orange-haired boy's eyes clear then, a grin breaking across his face, and the red-headed boy smiles too. The girl studies him for another moment, then tips her head in acknowledgement and rises to her feet.
I'll find you something dry to wear, she says. I assume there's a reason you were attempting to freeze to death?
Orochimaru would take offense, but he's too cold to manage more than mild indignation at the moment. He pulls the cloak. Yeah, he goes, judging by the black fabric and red clouds up around his neck, and nods. There were watchers, all the way from Konoha to Ame's border. I believe I threw them off, but I didn't want to risk discovery. The river was the easiest route here. Yahiko smiles a little. Well, I don't think anyone saw you until you passed into the caverns. One of our scouts was refilling his water skin into a dark shape, and he sent the message on ahead. I'm glad you're not an enemy, because that was clever. Ridiculous. Orochimaru corrects with a huff. I have clearly been spending far too much time around Jiraiya and Sakamoto for my own good, but I am glad it worked. If Konoha is willing to aid us against Hanzo, we are three. Yahiko agrees cheerfully, rising to his feet. I'm Yahiko, but you probably knew that already. We've met before, Nagato puts in unexpectedly, and Orochimaru turns to meet his unnerving Rinnegan eyes squarely. You're the one who said Jiraiya-sensei should just kill us and put us out of our misery. There is no hiding it, and Orochimaru knew that when he accepted the mission. He may have changed, but not much where appearance is concerned. He inclines his head and rises to his feet, holding the two boys' accusing stares. I am, he acknowledges. Miscalculation on my part, I will admit. Yahiko blinks and frowns, but Nagato tips his head a little, considering. You will mean that, he says, and there's a flicker in his eyes that says he understands the meaning behind Orochimaru's words. Not just the deflection they sound like, but the truth within. The apology he won't explicitly voice. You're not the same person you were. 6 years can bring a great many realizations. Orochimaru allows, not quite agreement, but as close as he'll let himself come. Such things are entirely personal, and he has no desire to air them in front of near strangers. You're there, Yahiko asks, but he's looking at Nagato, not Orochimaru. Nagato nods, not glancing away from Orochimaru, who holds his stare. I am, he affirms, and then turns to head deeper into the mountains. Come on, Yahiko. Orochimaru probably needs to hurry. Yahiko chuckles, falling into step with Orochimaru as they both follow after the redhead. He's a bossy little brat, he says fondly, and then gives Orochimaru a sidelong glance. I'll take it that you are bringing good news. That's been in short supply around here, so we could use some. Orochimaru is willing to bet it has. Hanzo is a fearsome enemy, and Akatsuki is a small organization with lofty dreams. Admirable, of course, but touched with a determined naivete Orochimaru has always despaired of in Jiraiya, and he can't quite bring himself to voice his doubt. There have been greater victories against worse odds, after all. Assistance and supplies, he answers. Konoha offers both in return for Ame placing a guard on the Wind Country border once your position is secured. To attempt to patrol it ourselves would leave Konoha short on manpower, and to make up for the difference we would have to start graduating Genin early. A possibility, but one Konoha would like to remain a last resort. Soft footsteps cut Yahiko off before he can answer, and Konan rounds the corner in front of them, arms filled with cloth. Here, she says briskly. You're about Nagata's size, so these should fit. Hurry and change before you actually freeze. Aren't I supposed to be the leader here? Yahiko complains good-naturedly, even as he turns to give Orochimaru some small measure of privacy. At the orange-haired man's impatient gesture, Konan passes Orochimaru the clothing, and does the same, though she rolls her eyes a little. Amused despite himself, because they remind him very much of Tsunade and Jiraiya as children. Orochimaru dresses quickly, the clothes a uniform dark gray with paler blue edging. He pulls the kimono top on, securing it with a wide sash, and feels 1,000 times warmer, even with his hair still drenched. He frees it from its ribbon, letting it hang loose so it will dry more quickly in the warmth of the cavern, and steps back to Yahiko's side. "Thank you," he tells Conan, tipping his head in a faint bow. "I appreciate your thoughtfulness."
She smiles back, just a little. "You're welcome. Yahiko, I think someone was waiting to speak to you in the meeting room. Nagato was with him when I passed by."
Yahiko frowns, concern drawing lines between his brows. "What? I'm not expecting anyone. Did you see who it was?"
Conan shrugs a little. "Not one I'm familiar with, sorry. But he was dressed like an Ame shinobi."
The worry grows, and Yahiko moves at a fast clip down the tunnel. Conan follows, and Orochimaru doesn't hesitate before he does the same. Future allies or not, more information on Akatsuki's movements can only be to Konoha's benefit. Beyond that, if there's a real threat, Orochimaru is well placed to defend Akatsuki's leaders and place them in Konoha's debt. Unfamiliar with the base's layout, Orochimaru is several seconds behind Conan as she ducks into a room, and he approaches just in time to hear a familiar voice say, "I am Kanzo, a trusted friend of Hanzo of the Salamander. He asked me to come in order to extend a hand of friendship to the Akatsuki in an attempt to bring peace to this country." The fury that snaps through Orochimaru almost takes him by surprise. He leaps through the doorway, passing Conan in a blur, and as he plants himself between the newcomer and the three Akatsuki members, he has the distinct pleasure of watching the man's face go lax with shock, his mouth dropping open mid-sentence. "Truly?" Orochimaru asks silkily, straightening to his full height and fixing narrowed eyes on the intruder. "Then shall I assume that, along with giving up your name, you have renounced all claims to your position as a shinobi of Konoha, Shimura Danzo?" Danzo's mouth twists into a snarl, and he steps back, one hand falling on his weapon's pouch. "Orochimaru," he spits, and then pauses, clearly fighting to bring his temper under control. Another moment, and when he meets Orochimaru's eyes again, his face is blandly pleased. "How convenient. It will be simple to remove you from the picture here, without any of your watchdogs. You're becoming a thorn in my side, my boy." A gesture, and masked figures in black slip out of the shadows, one after another. Orochimaru narrows his eyes, but their identity is obvious. Danzo's root, the missing Anbu. Fewer of them than there should be, so Danzo has either separated the group or already lost a good half of them. "I will ruin you," he hisses, just loud enough to carry. "For this, Danzo, for everything, I will ruin you." Danzo smiled, genially amused, and raises his hand. "You may try, my boy, but there is no light in you, no matter how you pretend, and only light may destroy the roots that thrive in the darkness." He flicks his fingers, and the root Anbu charges one. Orochimaru doesn't wait for a more blatant opening. He calls up his chakra, draws Kusanagi, and lunges for Danzo with his sword leading.